Hello, this is my blog post number 3 for CSC-355. Just as a quick refresher, in my first two videos, I covered the getting started with Unity pathway and got that all wrapped up. And so now in this video, I decided to get started with the junior programmer pathway. The first mission here is create with code 1, and I have the first two projects completed up to this point. So the first one here is called getting started, and there were two main things covered in this project. First, I had to install a new version of the Unity editor, which was super easy thanks to the Unity Hub. And then the second thing that was covered here was there was a video emphasizing watch, then do. So basically for all or most of the missions and in the tutorials in the junior programmer pathway, there's a video that sort of accompanies each step. And so they strongly suggested that as you're kind of going through it, to watch the video first, process all the information that's there, and then afterwards go into Unity and try to do it yourself, as opposed to trying to multitask and do it simultaneously. Their reasoning for that is just because if you can focus on one thing at a time, it really just helps you retain that information long term, and it's just like a better way of learning the material. And so that kind of wraps up getting started. So the next main thing here was Unit 1 player control. And this project is super important because player control is an important part of basically every video game. And so moving right into it, I think that one of the first things that they showed us that I thought was valuable and that I thought was actually missed in the getting started with Unity pathway was just being able to move around this your scene a little bit better. Again, I just don't think this was covered very well in the first one, but I feel like I'm much more confident now with just sort of looking around my scene and navigating stuff. Another thing that was pretty helpful is that like learning how to customize your editor a little bit. I have a preset saved here that I kind of like that I think makes sense because I like how you can see the scene view and the game view at the same time. So if you'll notice when I start my game, you can watch in both sort of windows there. That you can just see both things happening simultaneously, which is pretty cool. So the main thing though that they covered in the player control was the scripts, which will take user input and apply that basically to the game. So the first one here that we have, and this is part of the vehicle, is called just the player controller script. So if we can open that up a couple of different ways. One is just by clicking edit script like that. And here we have some of the same stuff, some of the stuff we've seen before. So like, you start with your speed, and then basically you have a transform, which basically tells to go forward, and then you have your delta time and then times your speed. And so that's what's going to move the car forward. The new stuff, I guess, would be the input stuff. So for instance, we have the horizontal input, and then each frame we're collecting that input here, and then we're just including that as another multiplier. So that's going to basically tell, how fast to go based on how, what the user is inputting. And so if the user is inputting nothing, then it would be a 0 and then it wouldn't move versus, they have like more control over basically how the car moves. And that same concept is applied to the rotation. And so that's what allows us to basically drive the car. So if we go back to our game really quick, another thing that they covered in this was the camera. So the big thing, I had to play around with the position and rotation a little bit to get it exactly where I wanted to. And then again, I had a script. This one's called follow player. And so if we take a look at this one, again, we have basically it's pretty simple. Basically what we're saying is that the position of the camera should, every frame should mirror the position. It's assigned to the same position as some object, which we haven't really declared yet. It's a variable player. And so plus an offset, which basically just accounts for the distance between the camera and whatever game object we're going to follow. So the last step then was, if we go back to the game, we know that the camera is going to follow along with some game object, but we had to tell it what the player was, what the game object is that we want to follow. And so I just dragged the vehicle on here, and that's kind of how the magic happens. So I guess one final time, if I'm playing the game, as you can see, more of the same stuff as in the other videos that I've covered. We had like the rigid body objects. So like you can see if we run into the obstacles, all the physics sort of apply here. And yeah, it was just another small little game that I was able to build with player control. And so then after I kind of got this game all working how I wanted it to, there was a challenge here. So I'll open that up really quick as well. And so when I first opened up this challenge, there were like a lot of bugs in it, and so that I had to fix. So again, there were more scripts here, and so like the player controller for this one, for instance, was missing some of the multipliers or maybe some of the values, and it just like I basically just had to debug it and get it working. And I'll show that it is working here. I'll go ahead and play. And there you can see that was my next game that I built. So oh, one other thing with this game was the propeller. So if you notice, the propeller was not spinning before. So I had to make my own script basically from scratch to deal with this one. And it was pretty easy again because it was just doing a rotation just like we did with the car when that one was turning. But the only tricky part really was I didn't know which direction to rotate around or which axis to rotate around. So I didn't know whether to change this to forward, up, or right. And so it was just really trial and error, I guess. And I found that it was forward, and that's what makes the propeller spin. And then, if we change this value, that's gonna make, I just kind of hard coded it in. So that's gonna just make it spin faster now. And we'll test that out really quick. So now you can see the propeller is gonna be spinning a little way faster than it was before. And yeah, so I was able to beat that challenge, and that kind of wrapped up almost everything within Unit 1. The last thing was a project design document. And I wasn't really sure if we were supposed to do this because I know we're supposed to be doing like our own themed game jam later in the year. But I decided that it might be a good idea just to kind of brainstorm and come up with a game. So again, I just sort of filled out this information and then did a timeline. And then here was the game that I decided to build. So again, all we've really learned is how to move around or rotate. So I just kind of did like a little maze obstacle course here. So the player plays as a bear, and the bear has to like cross the bridges without falling into the river, basically, is all. And so maybe not the most fun game, but it did help me, I guess, a little bit with just sort of like project planning and being aware of some of these things. I think once we do our game jam, I'll definitely maybe have like a document like this. And so, yeah, I think it was definitely useful to be able to do something like that, and also create sort of a storyboard, or I don't know what you'd call it. I guess just a diagram of what the game might look like. And so, yeah, that wrapped up almost everything with Unit 1, and I guess almost everything that I've learned up to this point. There was one other thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly, and that was basically I returned to my 2D game, and just as a refresher, I'll let it play really quick. This one didn't have any user input at the time, but basically I'm trying to add it in right now. And so I want the user to be able to move their mouse left and right, and that will move the pizza left and right. And then they like click a button, in this case, like the space bar, to drop it. And so I attempted to implement this in Visual Studio a little bit. I kind of use the same thing as before, where I'm doing a mouse X input, and I didn't do the arrow keys just because I don't know, I just thought it'd be a little bit nicer to have the mouse. And I think this portion of it is correct. again, I just took the input and then I'm using that as a multiplier in moving it right to the right and left. But it's becoming, or it's proving to be more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be, because I don't know, I just don't really know how to do it, because I feel like it has to be split up into like 2 phases. The first phase of the game, there should be like no gravity at all, and the user can, has full control when they move it left and right. But then after they press the space bar, um, the gravity should turn on. It should like somehow cue that to happen. And then also, when the user is moving left and right, it shouldn't do anything. And so breaking it up like that, and having the space bar like trigger those events, I'm just not sure that that was covered really in unit 1, and so I wasn't able to implement it yet. But hopefully, I'm hoping that in unit 2, the basic gameplay, I'm hoping that it's covered there, or maybe later on in some other missions. If it is, I'll definitely cover that in my next video. I think that brings me to the end of everything that I wanted to cover for this one. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.